And welcome to Politics Aside. Only thing I ask is today is that you sit back and relax and try to put politics aside. That's the purpose of this podcast, to invite friends that have made a difference in the world, to have a conversation with those friends, and to talk about what they see in the future based upon their experiences. And today, I have a very special guest and a good friend of mine. Mr. John Rose has two meritorious service medals, one Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, four Navy Achievement Medals, two Combat Action Ribbons, one Purple Heart, and a Presidential Unit Citation. Today, on the observed day of Veterans Day, I think it was appropriate to invite Mr. Rose to join us. Also, it's not his birthday, but it's the Marine Corps birthday.
Right.
248 years. I know, John, you and I were not there, but we appreciate celebrating that as well. So, Mr. Rose, enlisted in the Marines in 2001, combat training in 2002, served at Camp Lejeune, had tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and injured very seriously with an IED as he was serving our great country. Took 2 years of recovery to allow John to be one of the top leaders in the world of helping individuals with disabilities, especially those veterans. So, enough of that, John Rose. I appreciate your service. I'm proud of you. And more importantly, I appreciate your friendship. But what does this day mean to you? Today we're celebrating again the birthday of the U.S. Marine Corps, and it's the observed Veterans Day. What does today mean to you, John?
It's big for the Marine Corps because we're carrying on that legacy that started back in 1775. So I have my brothers and sisters across the entire country, across the entire world celebrating today. I've already got about 25 text messages started about 3 o'clock this morning. Happy birthday, Marines. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I'm trying to get some sleep. I haven't slept in 3 days, but and then Veterans Day is tomorrow. A lot of people, they look at these holidays because they don't really see it that much. 1% of 1% have ever served, so I get Friday off to observe Veterans Day, so let's go barbecue or let's go do this, to where you kind of listen to and I think I mentioned this to you a few times, Congressman Porter, is that John Glenn speech, not to be politics, but it was a great speech. He's the first astronaut to orbit the planet. He's the oldest astronaut to ever go back up in space, but also he served 23 years in the Marine Corps, did over 100 missions in 2 different conflicts. And he started running for the United States Senate in 74. And he had a debate with the current Senator Howard Messenbach. And Howard Messenbach's like, how are you going to serve the people when you've never had a job a day in your life? And he's like, hold on 1 second. And I'm paraphrasing here. Go out there and look at it. But, come with me to this veterans hospital and see all these people with their mangled bodies. Come to NASA with me and see all the widows and orphans of these astronauts. It's not that I didn't have a day of work in my life. It wasn't work. It was my life that was on the line. And people don't understand that yes, we get a paycheck the 1st and 15th of every month as active duty service member, but it's way more than just putting on a uniform and going to sing cadence or do anything like that. These people are forward in war. They're forward in places that we don't even know of. Maybe members of Congress, they probably should know they're there, but maybe they don't know they're there. But they're all over the place and you never know. So whenever you see somebody with that World War II veteran on or Vietnam veteran, I just ask, stop and say thank you. Appreciate your service, because a lot of those veterans coming back don't have what we have today. They got spit on. They was looked at, oh, you're just killers, all that crazy stuff. So my biggest ask is just the easiest thing, just say thank you for your service. Thank you for what I did for our country.
Well, my father served in World War II in the U.S. Army. He was stationed in the Aleutian Islands, and he really didn't want to talk about it a whole lot. And I'm so proud of you and certainly of my dad for his service. But I guess in that era, some of our loved ones didn't really talk about their service. Uh, you have been such a champion for men and women in uniform, those that have served, those that may serve in the future. and you exemplify what it's all about. Your life was on the line, and we almost lost you. Can we talk about that for a little bit,
Sure.
John?
Yeah.
Your experiences, and was it was in Afghanistan with the
Yeah.
IED?
Yeah. I got injured in May 15th, 2010 on a recovery mission. Our typical convoys, which is our vehicle movements, we're moving beans, bullets, and band-aids from point A to point B to point C to point D. It was a lot smaller convoy because when we got into Afghanistan, the current administration, the President Obama administration, decided to send 10,000 more service members into Afghanistan. So we got there with no real mission until everybody got there, and we was moving all the foreign services out, the British, the Gurkhas, from Nepal, the French, all these foreign services out, moving Marines in. It was a little bit of a smaller convoy, so I let my assistant take the convoy, and I took his position. We was going to recover some vehicles that got hit by some improvised explosive devices. And my biggest rule in my platoon was, we don't need to be city workers. I don't need 5 people with a shovel sitting around one pothole and one person working. So my biggest
And
rule
but
is,
if I may interrupt for a moment, so you retired as the master sergeant,
yes.
correct?
Mhm.
So you had a very solid leadership role throughout this process. So
Yes.
please continue. I just want everyone
And
to know.
I was very young then. I was only a sergeant then. So I was the only sergeant in my battalion that was leading Marines as a platoon sergeant. So it was, I was kind of hand plucked to go lead this platoon with a brand new lieutenant, trying to, I messed up my knee about 6 months prior. So they moved me up to be the operations chief, let me recover a little bit because they still wanted me to go on the deployment. But then we're on that convoy, and my next junior person, my assistant platoon sergeant, he hasn't ran a convoy of this size yet. So I'm like, hey, I'm still in the convoy. I'm gonna let you run it. If you have questions, here's our private frequency. You can call, ask me questions, stuff like that. Well, their last vehicle hit an IED. So their people got out, they swept with metal detectors, making sure there's no secondary or tertiary bombs out there. They said they gave us the all clear. So I pulled up, hopped out, stood in the first hole, which was only a 20 to 30 pound IED. So about 20, 30 pounds of explosive with rock and metal and all that crazy stuff. And as soon as I stepped into that hole, that's when I told my vehicle to push up onto the hill, to drive up on the hill to provide overwatch security with our machine gun. And as soon as that vehicle started to roll, the second IED went off, which was about 110 pounds.
In the same hole, was it this?
No, it was an offset. So what they learned, they learn all of our tactics that we do. So they see that we hit an IED, so they see how far our search team moves out. So okay, how far are the metal detectors, are they walking out? And they'll sit there and they may not plant anything for 5 or 6 times of us going through. They just stand back with binoculars and watch us. So they learn our protocols that we have when something happens. So when I got out, they knew my vehicle would be about 15 meters away or 10 meters away or whatever it was. So that's where they placed that secondary at, because the minesweepers only go out, say, 7 meters. So they'll put it at 10 meters. So as soon as that moves, another one goes off. So the second one went off. It hit me. Luckily, I was standing waist deep in the first IED hole, so it only hit me from the waist up. But it blew me out about 10 meters, broke my hip, shattered my right arm, cut me all the way through my face, lost vision in my eye, lost a bunch of teeth, burns up my right or up my left side. So all I really remember is boom, and then waking up a few weeks later in the hospital.
Well, and that was in 2010, correct?
Yes, that was in 2010.
And then survival. Credit to you for your you're inspiring other individuals, whether you're in the military or other professions. But again, kudos to you. And you then stayed in the service for another 10, 11 years, correct?
Yeah. And what I'm knocking on wood right now. And I'm so lucky to be here, because during those days in the 2009 to 2012 realm, what the Taliban was doing, or the insurgents, or whatever we're calling them these days, what they would do is put things in there so when they did blow you up, you would get an infection and die. As of, they may put feces in the bomb, or they may put this chloride on rocks and put the rocks in the bomb. So when those go into you, you get an infection and you may have been able to live, but the infection is what kills you. But going through all of that, getting ready to go back, and I'm trying to decide, do I want to stay in? Do I want to get out? And I made the ultimate decision. I've already served 10 years. I was a little over 10 years. I was like, hey, let's get after it. There's still more I can do. There's more if I can't deploy anymore, I can at least teach the tactics that I know to those young Marines that are getting ready to deploy. I can mentor lieutenants, company grade officers. There's a lot of stuff I can still do and be at the forefront of the fight, maybe not be in the fight, but be at the forefront of the fight.
So as you continued, though, as I can tell, and the more research I've done on you, my friend John Rose, I appreciated you, but spent a little bit of time looking at all the lives that you've helped change and help survive through difficult times. You have taken that strength and are now helping in the world of disabilities as well. So you then went to work on Capitol Hill for a while, correct?
Yep.
You talk about that experience and how that helped you evolve to where you are today, helping so many people.
Yeah, that was I never thought I was going to be able to get that opportunity, because every time I applied, they changed the criteria and then I wasn't qualified. And that last year, I'm like, I'm just going to do it. They need to tell me no. You got to have this degree, and then the next year it moves up a more advanced degree, and then the next year another advanced degree. I'm like, I'm shooting performance over education, performance in like actually being able to do stuff versus just going to college to learn how to do something. Because I've met a lot of people, they've been to college for a lot of great things, and now they're doing something completely different because they didn't like what they was doing. I loved what I was doing as a Marine. So when I got the opportunity to go up and be a congressional fellow for a member of Congress, it was different. I was 35 years old, 34, 35. And I come into an office that people are 22, 23, 24, very young staff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not in charge anymore. I'm low man on the totem pole. I'm listening to instructions by a 21-year-old because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm washing windows and, hey, I'm going down to Dunkin' Donuts. Would anybody like coffee? It's on me. And they're like, oh yes, because they're staff assistants, they're ledge assistants, and I'm making way more money than them because I'm still working in the DoD. I'm like, y'all want some coffee? I'll go grab some. It was hard to build that rapport because they look at them like, oh, this individual's coming from the DoD. He's a spy. He's going back, or she's going back and tell the DoD.
By the way, John, I never thought that you were a spy, so I'm glad you tipped me off on that one.
Yeah. So like building that relationship with the office, and it was eye-opening because I see what goes on Fox, on MSNBC, on CNN, local news, ABC, but to be there where the sausage is made is eye-opening because you're like, oh, that's what really goes on. It's not the bill becomes a law like back in the day we used to watch on Saturday mornings on PBS. We're like, oh, I'm a bill.
Or a house mouse, Senate mouse, right?
Exactly.
Well, can you explain? Because a lot of folks that are in the service will reach out and will ask me or my office or other members of Congress about the fellowship programs. Can you explain how that works? Because there's a lot of people who would like to do what you did and follow your lead. How did that work? I mean, you had, the bar kept changing. You thought
so every service had you get as many fellows as the size of your service. So like the Marine Corps has the smallest amount of fellows, and the Army has the largest. The Army brings, and don't quote me on this, like say 40 people, to where the Marine Corps only brings 15 people up. And the Marine Corps tends to bring more enlisted because they're more, I wouldn't say more experienced. They've been in the Marine Corps a little bit longer. And a lot of the officers we bring up may only have 6 to 12 years in, to where the time in service requirement for enlisted is 16 years. So you can't come on the fellowship until you have 16 years of service.
Okay.
Where on the officer side, it's more of a professional education program for them to learn how the process goes, because if they get promoted up to the ranks and they have to come testify on Congress, or they're doing requests for information from members of Congress, or they kind of understand the way it works. But for us, it's huge because we're going to be that the way I put it was I was the senior enlisted advisor to that member of Congress. I'd advise him on everything DOD, and he was the chairperson of the subcommittee of Coast Guard, so I had to learn a lot of Coast Guard stuff because he was on TNI. So it was interesting, like every day, like I subscribe to so much news. I take the metro in and I get in to the Capitol. My head's just like, oh, did you hear about that? And I was like, yeah, we don't care about any of that.
Which, by the way, was the first thing we did this morning before we started the interview. Was like, so what's happened in the world today?
Exactly.
Um,
And I
so
get in
then,
office and be like, oh, is this one of his priorities? Because I'm still young. And they're like, no, that's not one of his priorities. But, this is one thing. So trying to learn that member, it's just like in the DOD, no matter what branch you're in, if you're that senior enlisted, you got to learn your new boss, how your boss writes, how your boss speaks, how your boss does whatever. So you can say, hey, at that point in time that you may have to interject, because enlisted don't make any decision. We're just advisors. The officers are the decision makers.
yeah.
We just help advise them as much as we can. Kind of like the staff in a congressional office. They don't make the decisions, but they advise the boss on, hey, these are the opportunities.
Although sometimes they may think they're the
Yes,
member,
they
right?
may think.
But that's for another interview. We'll talk
And
about
there
that.
may have been a few times I tell my Marines, hey, I'm going to tell the lieutenant this, and that's what we're going to do. And then I go tell the lieutenant this, and then she's like, nah, we're not doing that. I'm like, oh, just playing with y'all. We're not doing that,
So you were still employed by DOD at the time to become a fellow, and it is a small world because as you and I have gotten to know each other, it's through your relations with a member of Congress. And can you talk about that a little bit? The member you worked with and some of the team.
Yeah, it was like I said before, it was interesting being the oldest person almost on staff, because like we had our legislative director or whatever, he has questions, and it's like I'm back in the Fleet Marine Force again, sitting kneecap to kneecap to a young lance corporal or a young corporal that's getting ready to have a kid or getting ready to buy a house, and walking them through things. Like we did a district trip, and I was one of two people that was old enough to rent the car. So trying to build through that, and then like also be respectful to the office because they work with that member. They've worked for that member for a few years. I don't want to burn any bridges with the people because there may be a drug issue that comes up. Well, that's somebody else. That's in their portfolio. So trying to build that relationships with them. And now what helps me now is those staff members are moved. So you have to keep those relationships just like we do in the DOD or in the service. Like I still talk to people I served with 20 years ago. And to keep those relationships, because those are then Fox News really isn't going to tell you much. CNN's not going to tell you much, but I can call some of my buddies that was on the Hill. Hey, have you heard anything about this? Oh yeah, it's getting introduced, but nothing's going to happen of it. They're just introducing it to introduce it. Keeping those relationships, and different members that come in to talk to your member, be like, hey, and then you see them in the hall. Hey, do you remember me? I worked for this person. And they're like, oh yeah, I do remember you. Hey, we need to catch up. Let's stop by the office. Here's my card, And so just building those relationships and keeping those relationships, doesn't matter. Politics aside, a person's a person. We all put our pants on the same way. You either start with your right or your left, and then you put your shoes on. You got a belt, you got a shirt on.
John, we want to come back to this part of the relationship building in a moment, because I think it plays a major role in where you and I are today in 2023. But your role then evolved with the Department of Defense. You were senior enlisted advisor and special assistant wounded warrior program. So tell us about that and some of the things that you're seeing happening in that part of the world of defense and helping individuals that are veterans.
That was a very rewarding, interesting, and a lot of work in that billet, because I reported directly to a 4-star equivalent, a Senate confirmed presidential appointee that served he was the Assistant Secretary of Department of the Navy for Manpower Reserve Affairs. So everything manpower and reserve affairs he ran. So that means like the title you read was special assistant, senior listed advisor, but that touched every portfolio of about 75 employees. So anything enlisted came across my desk. And it was my responsibility to bounce that off the services, because we're at the department level. And it's weird that the Department of the Navy is the only department with two services. Now we have the Air Force and the Space Force, but at the time we only had Navy and Marine Corps. Navy and Marine Corps operate completely different. One's more of a land-based and one's more of a sea-based. So trying to get them on the same in this, it's like dealing with Republicans and Democrats, trying to get them on the same page. It's hard. You got to compromise. So we would do that. I talked to the Marine Corps. I talked to the Navy, be like, hey, okay, I see you want this. How about we meet in the middle with this? I see you see this, meet in the middle here. But like transforming that wounded warrior care and policy issues throughout the Department of the Navy and carrying that through the Department of Defense was big, because I'm slowly starting to see some of those changes now with the skill bridge programs, with the internship programs. Like some of the things we was pushing way back then, and I say way back then, it was 4 or 5 years ago, is now finally turning to fruition. That I can watch. I read defense news every morning, be like, oh, I worked on that project. It finally got approved. It's finally implemented. It's working good. Or, hey, maybe I made a little bit of bad judgment here, and I'll call my buddy that's still up there. Hey, I said this, but maybe if we tweak it this way to be a little bit better. He's like, do you mind if I use that as my contribution? I'm like, dude, I'm retired. I don't care.
Well, John, can you explain, because you're so good and so passionate about serving veterans, especially, but all individuals with disabilities. What was it like then for you in transition, and what's it like for other thousands of individuals that are wounded? What's happening and how does it work?
So the wounded, ill, and injured, they go through a process called IDES, the Integrated Disability Evaluation System, which is, my John Rose opinion, is flawed, because they moved it a little bit too quick, and then they moved everything from the services to DHA, and there wasn't that kind of good turnover. It's slowly getting there now, because they moved it right before COVID. They was having all the processes in place, and then COVID hit, and they're like, we don't know what to do, and numbers got all messed up. So typically through the Integrated Disability Evaluation System, it's a 180-day process. You do all your medical appointments. The DoD finds you fit or unfit depending on their rating schedule.
But if I may, is that a lonely process, or is there support there?
So there's a lot of support there. So when you start the process, you have what they call a PEBLO, which is a physical evaluation board officer-ish. They kind of advise you, hey, this is the way the process is going to work. If you have problems, let me know. Here's my number. The problem is, the same way as the DoD has with mental health. Why would somebody come do that job in the DoD when they could do it in the civilian sector and make twice as much money? So they're very short-staffed on their PEBLOs. So that's kind of where that weak link is. And when you start that process, I went through 4 different PEBLOs, and that's supposed to be 180 days was the process. Mine was over 500. So,
well, I mean, recovery is forever, but it was about a 2-year window for you at
yes, yeah, and it was about a 2-year window. To go, well, the recovery process for me was a little different, because I got injured, then I got in that train wreck. So that kind of set my recovery back a little bit, getting hit by a train on a Veterans Day parade. But typically, it's about a 2 to 3 year process, because you don't start your medical evaluation board until you're, I wouldn't say completely recovered. You're like 75-80% covered. You've got the majority of your surgeries. Now you're just trying to find your new normal. I'm blind on my left eye, so I know when I walk into a room, I position myself to where I can see everything on my right. When you've seen me walk into different congressional meetings, I make sure everybody, which is good for me and you, because you're blind you're deaf on one ear and I'm blind on the other. So
that's why we're buddies.
We meet up just perfect.
We need each other.
But trying to go through that process, but with me, because I did the congressional fellowship, I worked at the highest levels of the DoD. I knew the people to reach out to. These E2s, E3s, E4s, they don't know who to reach out to. So
who should they? Let's assume someone's listening now that is experiencing, has some health challenges. who do they call? Are they aware who to call, or I mean, who should they call?
I reached out to my members of Congress. I reached out to my senators. I reached out to friends that I knew that was still at the highest level of the DoD. But a lot of these people don't know those people at the DoD. So you can easily make an inspector general's request. Hey, this is the issue. I'd prefer them not to make it anonymous so they can actually reach out to you and find out what your issue is, because you may think it's an issue, but somebody just didn't tell you to do something. So then that's going to fall back on you. So there's a lot of different avenues of approach. For the Marine Corps, we have request masked, which is it's kind of like an HR complaint, but it's to your commanding officer and one step above your commanding officer. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. There's self-advocates out there, the VFW, the American Legion, they do advocacy for the VA. They'll help you with your package, getting your rating
So
system.
the service organizations are very helpful as well. I've experienced that. So I hear you reiterating that there's that network too that makes a difference.
And the Marine Corps is we're very close hold to our Marines. We love our Marines. So the last duty station, I was the operations chief for the Wounded Warrior Regiment, which oversees all the wounded, ill, and injured Marines and any Navy corpsman that was attached to a Marine unit throughout the entire Marine Corps. So we're all the way from Okinawa, Hawaii, all through the United States. And we have different detachments depending on if you have a mental health issue. We know we've worked out, say, the Mayo Clinic is a very good hospital for, you get in a car wreck and you're paralyzed from the waist down. So we're going to send you. So our team collects all the data, and we have a surgeon and a medical team and advisors like, hey, where is going to be best? Because Congressman, say you as a reservist, you're living in Nevada and you get injured in a car wreck. Well, we may not want to send you all the way to the Mayo Clinic because your family,
Yes.
What keeps you together, because that's that weakest link, because we can make you recover as much as we want to, but if you don't have that support system behind you, just like we do now, having that support system behind you. Okay, so we may decide, hey, maybe there's a small hospital in Reno. We can send him to Reno. It's a little closer to Vegas. It's still a little bit of a drive, but that's closer to his.
And now Veterans Hospital in Nevada as well, which is in Southern Nevada.
Yeah, so we kind of just decide, like when the withdrawal from Afghanistan happened, me and my commanding officer was heading up to Ground Zero in New York City to give a talk about 9/11 when HKIA happened. So we had to pull over the side of the road. We're getting situation reports from all of our emails are blowing up because every casualty that comes throughout the Marine Corps comes to my email. So we're brief. Okay, this person should be going to Walter Reed, or this person should be going to Balboa down in San Diego, or this person should be going to Tampa because they're a polytrauma patient. So we're trying to decide of where all that goes. So if you're in the Wounded Warrior or in a Wounded, Ill, and Injured program, ask somebody there, hey, I got a question about this. That's their job. Ask them.
So what I hear you saying, if you are an individual that needs help, don't give up, because there are avenues to at least communicate.
Yes.
Early on and often.
Yep.
I'm sure nothing is perfect, and I hear of challenges that some individuals have, but what I hear you saying is there are systems. Encourage individuals to get into the system and to reach out to their member of Congress, like you said, or a veteran service organization.
Yeah, the only problem is a lot of the people that's going through the processes now are people that was wounded, ill, or injured back in the early 2000s, the mid 2010s, because back then you could lose your security clearance if you have a head injury, because now you're incapable of holding a clearance. So now those individuals are coming up and they've been alpha males and females forever. So we don't like to ask for help, but that's you have to have that willingness to make yourself better because you can make your community better all you want to, but you're just hurting yourself until you make yourself better.
Well, I want to talk about what we're doing today and what you're doing, but before we get into that, tell us about and I say this with a smile because you must have 9 lives. The injury from the train on Veterans Day. Can you share with us that for a moment?
Yeah. We was on a Veterans Day parade. It was 18-wheeler with a flatbed, like with banquet chairs. There's 12 service members, 12 spouses on 2 different floats, and there's kids out there waving, thank you for your service. It was kind of the culminating event. All the service members went on a hunt, and it just happened to be all male service members. And then all the spouses was supposed to go get a shopping spree, manicure, pedicure. They was going to be pampered all weekend. Like, no, like they provided childcare to watch the kids so the husband and wife could go do their thing and relax. And then we got hit by a train doing 67 miles an hour. We was coming across, the arm started coming down. I only have one eye, so my depth perception's off. So I stand up because the arm came down on me. I was like, oh, we'll pass it. I sit back down, and then boom, the train hits us. Killed 4 service members, injured 17.
What a tragedy.
Yeah,
I can't
broke my
imagine.
wife's collarbone, elbow, the bottom of her spine. There was, and the messed up thing is, we was on one side of the train tracks, the hospital was on the other side, so the ambulances couldn't get to us. So now you have a bunch of combat veterans. We're evaluating the scene, and we're triaging patients, and then the ambulance finally get there, and they're like, oh, that, like, they tell my wife, hey, stand up and walk over there. I'm like, no, she's a spinal cord injury. This person over here, we've already triaged them as number
So
one.
in your nature, you were taking charge even in the midst of your own injuries again.
That's what we do as service members. We're trying to get those spouses off of their fallen service members, because there was 4 of them that passed right there on the spot, and we're trying to get spouses off them. We're trying to get the crowd back, because the crowd wants to try to come in. And it's like I talked about, 7 city workers holding shovels and only 1 person working. It's hard to work around people that's just coming up on your position. Oh, trying to take pictures, trying to do this, getting them back. Like, I lost my belt because somebody's like, hey, we need to put a tourniquet on this lady's leg. So I gave them my belt. They put a tourniquet. She lost her leg, but she still continues to live today.
Well,
So
John,
those type of things.
if I may ask, so your training is critical as a leader. Do instincts kick in those moments, or what happens in that moment when you're hurt yourself, but you're still a leader? Well, tell me about that. Is that instincts take over? What happens?
It's muscle memory. Like, as service members, we go through this training so often. Like, when I was carrying my Marines through stuff when we was out in 29 Palms out in California, I'm yelling and screaming so much that I lose my voice for 2 or 3 days. I'm slapping rocks together. I'm throwing stuff at vehicles to make them feel like they are in combat. So when they're kind of used to that. That's just some pop shots, or that's just this. Or we may put 300 tourniquets on a dummy a day to get you through that muscle memory. To see, if it's dark, you may not be able to have a white light flashlight. You may not be able to see to get, okay, I know where to put it. I know where the knee's at. I need to go 3 inches above the knee. Oh, nope, I need to go 5 inches above the knee because the wound's here. And to be able to do that in the darkness, or in the bright light, or you lost your sunglasses, or you're laying on your stomach, to give those service members different opportunities to where we do get into the bad times. It just comes back muscle memory every single time. You know how to do it. Like, right now, I have a tourniquet. I have a whole first aid kit in my vehicle. Like, I'm driving back from North Carolina yesterday, and I see somebody swerving in and out. I'm like, oh, what's going on? They get in a wreck. Like, and I'm saying this didn't happen, but say that did happen.
You were anticipating
I
that
have,
something
yeah.
maybe was going to happen.
I'm willing to cop out, and like, I have a seatbelt cutter that's sitting right in my door. I can cut a seatbelt off. It has a window slasher. So those are the things that I'm always prepared to do. I hope I never have to do. Just like when I can still carry a gun, I hope I never have to pull my gun, but it is there in case I do need it. Just like a first aid kit is, and I would recommend anybody have a first aid kit in your car. You never know when you might need it. You have a young kid, oh, maybe just a Band-Aid, but you may come up on a situation where you may need something.
Well, John, you've done amazing things, and again, your awards, as I mentioned early, are really minor compared to all the things that you've done, and we do appreciate that. We both work on a project as well, and that's helping individual with disabilities find employment within the federal complex. And I think that what you and I are working on today is because of our past and our history and what we learned as public servants in different capacities. And I did not have the honor of serving as you in the military, but I believe we're here for a reason now, John Rose, together working on a project. So, can you talk about some of the things you're doing with Source America and the Ability One program and individuals, specifically veterans? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and the one thing I want to start that off with is just the Marine Corps' mission. We win battles, we fight wars, and we return good citizens back to their community. And that's what I'm trying to do, is be a good citizen in my community. Source America, we're in all 50 states. We have federal contracts, over 400 installations across the US, and we employ over 32,000 people with significant disabilities or blindness. But what does that do in the community? That's the part that really gets to me, because you have Lance Corporal Rose that leaves Camp Lejeune. He's not staying in Camp Lejeune. He's moving to Boise, Idaho, or he's moving to Reno, Nevada, trying to place them in positions where they can still be good community servants, because that's what a lot of DoD people want to do. But then you put that on the other side, we have to, the unemployment rate, what we talked about the other day, was about 56 to 57% of people with disabilities. I do site visits all the time, and like, these employees with significant disabilities love coming to work because they're not in their house. They're not, stuck doing mundane things. They're around other people like them and people that are able-bodied, and they're doing hedges, they're making uniforms, they're making parachute riggings, flags that's flown over every casket of a fallen service member. Those are the type of things we're bringing people in the community is like, oh, yeah, blah, blah. Yeah. But we're engaging them and employing them, and, we're saving the federal government $2.66 per dollar spent on
Yeah,
a federal contract.
can you kind of just take a moment and explain a little bit how that works? For the Ability One is a federal program, and then the nonprofit community through Source America and NIB. Can you explain how that
Yeah.
works?
Yeah. So we're kind of governed by our commission members, which are 15 presidential Senate confirmed appointees. 4 of those are private citizens, 11 of those are federal employees. And that kind of breaks down to 2 individual central nonprofits, which is Source America and the National Industry of the Blind. And underneath that, we have our network. For Source America, I think our numbers around 375 to 400-ish nonprofits. NIB has I don't even 100 plus. So what we do is, if you've ever been in the DoD and used Skillcraft and pens or Skillcraft notebooks or sticky notes, those are made by the industry of the blind. The parachute rigging, the flags, as I talked about before, are made by Source America nonprofit agencies. But what they do, as far as Source America and NIB, we're kind of that middle person. So we're helping our network of people if they need to engage with their local members or their federal members, or they have an issue with the VA or Department of Treasury. We bring that to the Hill to help advocate for them, because if you're in Washington State or Hawaii, can you fly all the way to DC to talk to 2 members of Congress in a day? We're right here in DC. So they'll pass that information to us in the Porter group, and we'll advocate on their behalf. And if we can bring them in to tell their stories,
Right.
because that's what the members really want to hear. How is that helping my constituents? And that's something we explain. Like, I have a few meetings up on the Hill today, just getting in there and educating them on the Ability One program and how this not only affects their community, but it affects people with disabilities and gets them engaged in the community. And now we just did grassroots a few months ago. There was 2 or 3 self-advocates is like, hey, I want to be an advocate all the time. How do I go speak to my local chamber? How do I go speak to my council member? Trying to get those individuals to speak to those people, because that's where it all starts, is in that local community. Keeping those people in that community, or if they want to move to another community, that's fine. But supporting that community and supporting that individual, but not only just that individual, but the family also.
So through the Ability One program, as mentioned, is a federal organization, and then contracting, with Source America, NIB. The network of nonprofits are amazing in what they do. They're working with families, loved ones, caregivers. Can you talk about that process a little bit through the nonprofit community?
Yeah, what they do is the the biggest thing is bringing, like I always say, that weakest link. Like when I went through the recovery process, I could do it all day long. I'm only getting as strong as my weakest link, and at the time, I may have been that weakest link because I wasn't including my spouse or my family, because they help you. They push, or they poke the bear from time to time. Hey, I know you got an appointment at 10 o'clock and you didn't go to sleep till 2. How about I drive you to your doctor's appointment? But like including that family in there to where they have. I was just out at I think it was Challenge Unlimited out in Illinois last year. Once a quarter, they have a quarterly breakfast, and they invite all the employees, all their family members, and they do like a pancake breakfast or whatever it was. You know, they include them in it because me as a person with the disabilities, I may not tell my spouse everything, or I may not tell my employer I'm dealing with more stress than I'm. You bring that family member in, that family member's like, oh, that's your boss. You've been coming home a little stressful. Or the perfect example, I was out in Huntsville. There was a guy that had an administrative job. He came home every day hating his life because he didn't want to sit in the office because it had no windows. They had a lunch or a town hall meeting, and something came out. They moved him. He got promoted out of the Ability One program. Now he's making way more money, and he's a manager now because he likes being outside inspecting vegetation. So the grass has to be cut up to 27 inches off the road. The bushes had like he loves being outside, smelling the pollen, the wind. He has his own little ranger. Those are the things that our network, and it's individual based. It's not one thing catches all. It's okay. John Rose needs this support. John Porter needs this support. This person needs this support, and they tailor everything around them to make them more comfortable. Maybe come out of their shell, maybe not come out of the shell, maybe just get out of the house and do a little bit of work, be in the sun a little bit. There's so many different stories I could tell out there because every one of them is different.
Well, and I think it's important to note these are not funded through earmarks, right? They're
Nope.
contracts that are available through the Ability One program across the country. So how does that work? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a bid that goes out. Say there's something in DC here at one of the bases here in DC. There's a contract that goes out and they put a bid for it. So it's not like the Small Business Administration gets a certain amount of set asides, or women with small business get a certain set of set aside. That's reason there was a lot of stuff on the Hill we was doing with 1% goal to get a little bit of a chance of a bite of the carrot. But we're doing such a good job that we don't have a goal set by Congress, but there's still federal entities out there that's awarding us contracts because we're doing such a great job. Like NASA's over, they promise 1%, and they're giving, we have like 6 or 7% with them. The DoD, we're working up to 1% with them. We're already almost a 0.6%. So like they see the work we're doing. It's just getting more people, more stuff in there to where they're like, oh wow, y'all are doing great things. I was just at a Marine Corps ball 2 days before down at Camp Lejeune, and I started explaining stuff to that commanding officer, and I was like, did you know, because they're right across from the Naval Hospital, all the grass, all the janitorial, all the sanitation. She's like, people with disabilities do that? I'm like, yes. And they're in your building.
And
She's like,
happy.
oh my goodness, I did not
And
know that.
happy.
I'm gonna have to, we need to talk some more. I'm like, okay, let me know. I'll drive down to North Carolina and we'll get on a Zoom call. We'll explain everything,
Well,
but educating those individuals about stuff that we do is super important.
you're really important. And John, I really just appreciate your time and all that you're doing. And someday I want to walk through all those challenge coins on your wall. I'm sure everyone has a story that we'll have another program on that. The
Well,
last
this is
thing I
only
would
half.
ask is,
The other,
I'm sorry.
this is only half. The other half's in my office in Vienna.
Then there are a lot of stories. I guess really one of the last things is, how did you find Source America? And you're doing such amazing things there. How did that come about?
It was interesting because 20 plus years in the DoD, I've never heard of Source America. I've heard of Skillcraft. I've heard of Ability One because maybe I saw it on a placard somewhere. The chief of staff that I worked for up on the Hill is now the government affairs vice president. He's like, hey, the CEO really wants to push hard on veterans and caregivers. Is there something you can provide to the team? I'm like, absolutely. And literally, I started getting paid through Outsource America before I even got my DoD retirement. That's how quick I started there, because I loved the mission. I loved what they're going after. I love what they're doing to support the warfighter, the industrial base. They're doing all the things that back in the day when I first joined in 01, 02, 03, I'm the person out there. I'm trimming the bushes. But that's taken me away from training. I can't train to do my combat skills if I'm sent off for 2 weeks to go do this, that, and another, to where we're employing these individuals. It's assisting, loosely based, assisting our service members to be warfighters.
Well, so I think that's the reason you and I are here today, to talk about individuals that need help the most, your experience. Uh, I want to say thank you, as I know our time is up. But again, personally, thank you for your service, the sacrifices that you've made, and the sacrifice your family has made. For us to be here, to see even better days in the future, to help more individuals with disabilities. So, Mr. Rose, is there any last things you'd like to add here before we close?
I just appreciate everybody that served this country, no matter if it's military, first responders, cops, firefighters, civil leaders. If you see any of them, they're working towards making this country a little bit better. If you're walking down the street and see a piece of trash, pick it up. That just made this world a little bit better. Throw it in the trash. That's all I ask. Thank people for if they do good jobs, and make your community better as much as you can. If it's just the little thing of picking up a bubblegum wrapper, that makes your community just a little bit better.
Thank you, John. Again, appreciate your friendship, your time, and look forward to working with you even more so in the future. So, to all those listeners, thank you for being with us today. Politics aside, again, all we ask is that you put politics aside for a moment and to listen to some individuals like Mr. Rose that are helping to change the world. So, thank you all, and please be safe. Take care.
Semper Fi.
And happy birthday.